The next item on the agenda is going to be special exception under public hearings, special exception 05-09. Mr. Fincham?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, your first public hearing tonight is SPX 05-09, HAT LLC owner, Virginia Sports Complex applicant. They're requesting an amendment to special exception permit in accordance with Article 17 and Article 4, Section 5.19 on tax map 67-A-58. The subject property is the Virginia Sports Complex off of Jefferson Davis Highway, or US Route 1. They are proposing an amendment to a previously approved special exception permit to amend several conditions related to that permit. One is to host additional events other than the events specifically identified with the previous use permit. They're also requesting an amendment to allow the sale of alcohol at special events at the indoor facility, as well as amending two other conditions related to the connection to public sewer and permit review requirements. Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request at its July 15th meeting and forwarded a recommendation of approval subject to the amended conditions at its August 25th meeting. One of the principal concerns discussed was a sale of alcoholic beverages, and after meeting with the Sheriff's Department, that condition or request was amended to address the concerns of the Sheriff related to the sale of alcoholic beverages and the approval of those events. The full staff report is included in your packet, and with that, I'll address any concerns or questions that the board may have.
Board have any questions of Mr. Fincham before we open the public hearing?
I do have one quick one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thomas?
What was the resolution to the concerns about alcohol being served? On page 4, the specific condition, the language would be or suggested language is as follows. Alcohol may be served in the indoor facility subject to the approval of the Sheriff's Office, which may impose conditions on such service to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. Such approval shall not be unreasonably denied. No alcohol may be served or consumed at any outdoor event or during children events. Okay, but on page 3, just before it says no alcoholic beverages shall be permitted on site.
That's the original condition that they're requesting the amendment to.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Other questions of Mr. Fincham before we open the public hearing? We declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the special exception request? If so, please come forward, state your name and your voting district. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the special exception request? If so, please come forward, state your name and your voting district. One last call. Is there anyone who would like to address this issue either in opposition to or in favor of? Please come forward and state your name and your voting district. Seeing no comments, public hearing is declared closed. Board have questions of Mr. Fincham?
I don't have a question of Mr. Fincham just yet, but as a courtesy, there was a lady who came before at the wrong public hearing.
Ms. Derricott.
She has since
Ms. Derricott left. I talked to her for the last 10 minutes or so about this and another question she had.
What was her issue with this?
Her concern was about the impact on her property. Her concern was, alcohol consumption and people trespassing on her property. And we talked about the specific language related to the Sheriff's Department review and approval, and I believe she was comfortable with that.
I just wanted to make sure that we'd address her concerns since she was at the wrong one.
Are there other questions of Mr. Fincham?
I have a question. So the sheriff has to approve for them to have alcohol?
Yes, sir. It would be, we've had the discussion about special event permits, changing our festival permit to a special event permit. And this condition is in effect a special event permit. And it was discussed with the sheriff. The applicant agreed to that condition. We amended language in there to address our concerns about unreasonable denial of a permit. And that was discussed with the county attorney's office.
So everybody that has a special event has to get the permission from the sheriff's office to do it?
At this location where there's alcohol.
No, that's not what I said.
No, sir.
Everybody who has a special event that has alcohol has to get the permission of the sheriff's office?
No, sir. That's a condition specific to this use permit.
Is there a reason why we're doing that there?
Out of concerns that were raised about events, rowdiness of potential customers, etc.
But we don't have those concerns anywhere else in the county?
I'm not sure that I would agree with that statement. You had an amendment to a special exception permit in which that specific issue was addressed. It does not generally apply. You had an application.
The current application?
Yes, where there was concern about the type of events that might be held where there was the sale or consumption of alcoholic beverages.
I'm back to my first question. We have several special exception permits all over the county for all different kinds of things, right up into over at the Virginia Bazaar.
Yes, sir.
Is that subject to the sheriff's office approval also?
In some cases, yes. For example, this board has approved several festival permits. You have approved a festival permit for a jazz festival next month that is subject to approval of the sheriff's department in terms of staffing, the number of people needed to provide security at that event. So there are situations where this board has approved festival permits which require security plans, EMS plans, et cetera, that are worked out prior to the event being held.
We did that blues concert last year, or whatever that was at the same place.
Same thing. You've already approved that for next month. Yes, sir.
And they had to go to the sheriff's department to get approval to serve alcohol.
I think they had a security plan. I think they did this.
I guess that's just new language, and I guess I didn't realize that. Getting approval is one thing to me. Having a plan worked out with the sheriff's office, I guess, is something different, because they have to pay for the sheriff's office to come. Is that not true?
In the events, the festival permits, yes, that's correct. And there may be situations here where, as part of the approved plan, there is security that is required to be provided by the sheriff's department or some other type of security agency.
Right, and I agree with that. But what if the sheriff's office just says no? What's their recourse?
Come back to the board and request an amendment of the special use permit to address that specific standard, if you approve it as is.
How else could we approve it? Because we only have it one way. Are there other suggestions of what we should be looking at then, since you're saying that as it stands right now? So was there other staff recommendations that we're not aware of?
Not related to this. This was crafted, I mean, you could require the equivalent of a festival permit to be approved by the board, okay? We did not think you wanted to be involved with the approval of every type of event that might occur here.
Right.
over
Nor
the
do
course
I
of a
want to.
12-month period.
Nor do I want to be. But
Right.
I guess what I don't want to do is get a business that gets to the point where the sheriff's office just says no. What's their recourse?
Understood. I think the recourse, at least as proposed, would be to come back to the board and ask for this condition to be amended. One option the board might want to consider is to put a review period on here to see how things work over the course of the next year or two concerning this condition. That would allow the board the opportunity to
We always want to review.
review the number of events that were held and whether there were any issues related to that.
After the next election.
Okay.
Mr. Rozelle?
What was the planning commission's thoughts on, in the discussion when they talked about this? At the planning commission, did the applicant agree to these conditions?
Yes. And the applicant is here, he can address that. He had talked to the sheriff's office about those concerns, and I think the language that was ultimately crafted addressed the sheriff's concerns, addressed the planning commission's concerns, and I believe they addressed Mr. Cobb's concerns as well.
Okay, now, on some special exceptions, do we have some requirements about so many security personnel for so many people in attendance? And we don't have this in this one.
We don't have it, but the idea was with the sheriff's department approval of the events that the security would be, security arrangements would be developed and approved as part of the sheriff's department approval for that specific event. There are no limitations on size, for example, and we did not feel that we could craft a standard of you know, one law enforcement personnel for X number of people, because you might have different types of events with different attendees, et cetera, et cetera. So from that perspective, it made more sense to treat it similar to the way we treat festival permits, where they have to get the sheriff's approval prior to the event. We didn't feel comfortable developing specific standards.
All right. And just on condition 20, which was added, well, that's okay. You said that the applicant's good with the conditions.
Sure, I mean, that's...
Just so we actually, as far as the sheriff goes, I'm Philip Cobb with the complex, and we actually, when we first applied, there were some concerns, so we just came up with the fact that why not have the sheriff approve it, because we're not looking to do this often. We're not an advocate of this at all. We don't want to sell it, excuse me, during outdoor events or while the youth is involved. So we're trying to do other events such as, whether it's gymnastics, which wouldn't apply with alcohol, but other events like this, boxing, to where there is a market for alcohol, selling alcohol. And we are looking to do roughly 4 events per year. They want to do one every quarter. And it may come to, of those 4 events, that's the only time we want to sell alcohol. Or other events like this. So I look to get a temporary license or a banquet license through the ABC board, and that is not allowed since we're a for-profit company. So the other way was to get a permanent ABC license. So we were approved by the ABC board, and this is the next step. So we are completely agree with everything, and we met last month with the Planning Commission and the different conditions. We are okay with those.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
I have a concern, I think I expressed it to you when you called me. I have a concern from the standpoint that the boxing events, and I think at one time, did you not have some Ironman events over there at your location? No?
Mixed martial arts?
Yeah, mixed martial arts or whatever it's called.
It's similar,
Did you or didn't you?
it's a the ultimate fighting is what it's.
Ultimate fighting, yeah, yeah.
It's similar to boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it on TV. I know what it's about.
Not
I have
quite similar. It's totally
But I'm just
different.
concerned from the standpoint that we have to be careful with allowing alcohol to mix with some of these events that get people really excited, and it may end up moving to the outside and then becoming a much larger problem. You know, if I have a concern, my concern is the fact that the sheriff won't put enough people over there to cover the event, rather than having a concern about the sheriff being able to control it. I think it needs to be controlled, to be honest with you, as far as security is concerned. And that does concern me. I don't know how many people you had to attend those events. What was the number of people you had to attend the last boxing match that I think Mr. Seal was involved in?
Well, the boxing match, they only had about 200 some people. The last MMA fight was about 700, 800. However, and if we felt like it was unsafe, if things were not in line or security wasn't in place, we wouldn't have the event. It's not worth it to us. Again, this isn't our main business. However, we are looking for other ways to survive without just doing baseball tournaments. I guess, so as far as number of security, these guys, the group that comes in, they supply security themselves, probably 20 to 30 different guys as security, and then on top of what the sheriff provides.
So you're saying the promoters provide
security as
20 to
well.
30 security people in addition?
And we had one of the events, and we found that it's very controlled. We had zero problems. Actually, we have more problems with the coaches on the baseball tournaments.
But you weren't selling beer.
Sorry?
You weren't selling beer.
No, we were
Is that
not.
right?
You're correct.
So again, when you get a few beers into an individual, they seem to get quite a big nerve, and they're willing to take on some of the biggest guys around, and it creates problems.
Well, this type of group, I mean, they do one every month other places that they go around, and again, they were looking to come to this location about every quarter. They do serve alcohol at their other events, and they don't. And I don't. No one's here to tell you, but they don't have issues like you would think. It's a clientele that is. I guess maybe it's a different clientele.
Okay, thank you. Board have other questions? Has the board wish to resolve this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve this request, special exception 0509, and I would like to have we have a review renew period, Mr. Fincham. Review, renew, that's a two?
Review is when the board reviews a permit to see whether any conditions, whether conditions have been complied with, whether there are any issues that the board believes on its motion that the special use permit should be amended. A renewal,
Right.
they actually have to go back through the process.
Okay. So we would want, in order to alleviate all the concerns that we hear regarding the serving of alcohol, and there may be a problem, if we do a one-year review, then we would have 1 year. But if there are problems before then, you, of course, have the ability to pull their special exception because of problems.
I don't have the ability to pull the special
board does.
exception. The board has the ability to hold a public hearing and.
Right, which we've done before on some other things. Okay.
Yes, sir.
1 year review period, I'd make the motion that we approve it with a 1 year review period.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Seeley, that we approve the special exception 05-09 as sent to us from the Planning Commission, in addition to a condition concerning the Sheriff's Office, having ultimate approval of events. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Fincham. Proposed creation of Caroline County Wireless Service Authority.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at its July 14th meeting, the board conducted a first reading on the proposed creation of a Caroline County Wireless Service Authority pursuant to the terms of the Virginia Wireless Services Authority Act. And the purpose of the authority is to provide a vehicle to promote the availability of high-speed data service and internet access to local businesses, county government, and the general public. Following the discussion on July 14th, the board authorized the advertisement of a public hearing for the adoption of the resolution that's necessary to create the authority. Under the board's bylaws and rules of order, the second reading is constituted by the public hearing. The public notice requirements for a wireless service authority are a bit unique and require that the public hearing be held not less than 30 days from the date of the advertisement. So the earliest that we could hold the public hearing, even though the first reading was July 14th, is tonight's meeting. And the public hearing has been advertised properly for tonight. The Wireless Service Authority, as I said, can be created by resolution and not by ordinance. And the county attorney has prepared the ordinance that you have in your board packet to do that tonight. It also includes an Exhibit A, which specifies the articles of incorporation of the authority. With that, Mr. Chairman, final comment is that the board may adopt the resolution following the public hearing if it so chooses.
Board have questions of Mr. Fincham before we open the public hearing. Mr. Pardon. He looks like Mr. Fincham.
I'm a little taller.
A little more hair.
Easy.
No questions of Mr. Pardon.
No, Mr. Chairman, if I will, well, you can go ahead and do the public hearing and then
We'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the proposed creation of the Caroline County Wireless Service Authority? If so, please come forward, state your name and your voting district. Seeing absolutely no one willing to move, we're going to declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Pardon? I think Mr. Thomas has a comment or a statement or a question or something.
I didn't need to get Mr. Pardon up at all. It was really just a statement that it was the Technology Committee's desire to create this umbrella authority with which all of the separate county agencies could work together in terms of technology. So that's really what I was saying.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'd make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Thomas, second by Mr. Popovich, that we create the Caroline County Wireless Service Authority. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Pardon.
Yes, sir.
Proposed amendment of Chapter 37 of the Code of Caroline County to increase the fees paid as part of the court cost in certain cases and to provide for the limited use of funds generated by the law library assessment fee.
Mr. Chairman, the board again conducted a first reading on the proposed amendment of Chapter 37 of the County Code and authorized a public hearing advertisement for tonight's meeting. The purpose of this amendment is to increase fees that are paid as part of court costs in certain cases and to expand the available use of funds generated for the law library fee assessment. The county currently imposes a fee of $2 on all criminal and traffic cases in both district and circuit court as allowed by state law. The revenue generated from this fee has certain limitations, principally that it must be used for renovation or maintenance of the courthouse or electrical costs, heating, cooling, maintenance of buildings, that sort of thing. As a result of a recent change in state law, localities may now charge that $2 fee on the courthouse for civil as well as criminal court cases. The state law also expands, loosens up some of the criteria for use of the funds acquired for from the $4 fee on the law library. And so the purpose of the amendment that's proposed tonight is to incorporate those changes that the state law allows, and certainly will create a little extra money for the county with regard to courthouse maintenance.
Questions of Mr. Pardon? Thank you, Mr. Pardon. We'll
Yes, sir.
open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the amendment of Chapter 37 of the Code of Caroline? Same friendly group, not one to move. Public hearing is declared closed. Board have questions of Mr. Pardon? How does the board wish to solve this, dispose of this issue?
I make motion that we accept the proposed amendment as presented by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Seeley, that we approve the amendment of Chapter 37 of the Code of Caroline County to increase the fees paid as part of the courthouse, the court cost in certain cases, and to provide for the limited use of funds generated by the law library assessment fee. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Unfinished business. Proposed amendment of Section 7.1 of the Caroline County Zoning Ordinance Administration, filing and acceptance of conditions at the time of zoning map amendments. Mr. Benjamin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board asked that this item be brought back for further discussion at the meeting tonight. If you remember, at your July 28th meeting, August 11th meeting, we discussed several proposed amendments with the idea of providing some assistance to the housing industry that the board did act on related to modifying the collection of fees. The board wanted to discuss this item a little bit further. I've prepared some additional comments at the end of my memorandum, and I'll be more than happy to address any concerns or questions the board may have.
Board have questions?
Well, this is when we discussed this last at our August 11th meeting. I think you were joking, but you said some of the proffers we negotiated in the past year may not be legal, and I just wanted to make sure that we all understood you were really joking, and that wasn't necessarily true, because I'm sure Mr. Emerson or some applicants would have let us know, right?
Yeah, Mr. Emerson just sent me the evil eye. Yes, you're absolutely correct. I was only joking.
Just wanted to make sure. I have no problem.
You have no problems with what we have here? Okay?
Mr. Akers, I'm still not comfortable with changing proffers. I think proffers that have been set are proffers that need to stay. I think that we've given builders the 60 days to pay connection fees and those kinds of things that I think will facilitate, I understand their payment structure. I don't have a problem with that, but in terms of, I'd like an example of a proffer we're going to change. Because I don't think I understand what we're changing when we're changing proffers by what's stated here.
The board only changes proffers upon application by an individual to change those proffers. Okay, so you're not changing anything unless they come in with a zoning amendment to change a proffer. Let me give you an example, okay? And I'll use a cash proffer example. You approve a rezoning, and one of the proffers that the board accepts with the original rezoning is that cash proffer will be paid at the time of the issuance of the building permit.
Okay.
the applicant or subsequent applicant, because remember, proffers are binding upon heirs, successors, and assigns, okay? So the original applicant or some other individual who has purchased that property comes back to the county and says, I would like to amend that proffer to change the collection date from the issuance of the building permit to the application for water and sewer service, since that was the example that was used in our previous discussions. The applicant or their successors and assigns actually has to make an application to amend that rezoning to change that proffer. That does not change. The applicant still has to make that request. What this amendment might do would be to allow the board to consider that request without either the commission or the board having to go through the public hearing process to make that change. It's still a zoning amendment that the applicant has to formally make an application and go through the process, perhaps with the exception of the public hearing. As part of this, they actually have to make a request to the Board of Supervisors to waive one or both of the public hearings otherwise required by the state code. And you actually have to grant that request in whole or in part. They still have to go through the process. They still have to go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has to consider the application, the merits of the requested change, and make a recommendation to the board. If the board does not grant the request for the waiver of the public hearing, then the Planning Commission would hold the public hearing. So the process is the same process. The applicant still makes the request. The commission and the board both still review the request. The one potential change would be that the board could consider eliminating the requirement for the public hearing at either the commission or the board. But it's still a public process. We would still send notices to the abutting property owners or anybody else required by code. So all of that would still be a public process.
See, we're not going to change anybody's proffers. Well, I'm not. But if they want to make a change, they have to basically come back to the board again.
Right now, they still would have to come to the board and request a proffer amendment.
Right.
It would still go to the Planning Commission. Right now, the commission would hold a public hearing, make its recommendation to the board, and the board would hold its public hearing before rendering a decision on that request. So right now, we can still go through this process. If I'm a developer and I have proffers, I can come in right now and make an application and request a change to those proffers.
And I understand that, and I guess, and I'm going to take your crash proffer as an example, since that's a great one. Belmont North, the cash proffer to the county is $1,100. So if we're gonna waive all this for $1,100 per house are we going to do this for wholesale for 100 houses or 50 houses? Okay, so they're going to ask for the whole subdivision? I guess what I'm grappling with is what are we let's quantify this a little bit. $1,100 per house is the cash profit from Belmont North. When they come in with a change of proffer, and we'll say, let's just say this is the only thing we'll consider for this process, because it's not a change in density, it's not a change in physical location, anything stupid. How big what's the change going to look like? Tell me what somebody's going to request with just the cash proffer. All the houses in the subdivision, the first year's worth? I mean, what are we talking about? What are we...
Again, the only thing I could tell you is right now in Belmont North, that developer could come in and make an application to amend
any proffer. I just took one, because what I'm hearing is we're not going to consider all the other proffer. I mean, we're not going to consider school site, fire station, higher density. I mean,
Yep. A developer could come in right now and make application to amend all of those, okay?
okay.
I just want to make...
And so if they come in and they want to do that underneath this, if we change this, they could technically do it, because it's a change in proffers.
If you
approve it.
If you grant the request to be relieved of the public hearing,
Right.
that's what this speaks to. It does not speak to...
do that now.
It does not speak to your actions as to whether you approve or deny the proffer amendments, okay? I just want to make sure we're not confusing those two issues, okay?
I understand. It doesn't mean approval.
That's correct. It simply means you're allowing, in some circumstances, and we have not attempted to define those circumstances, okay? There's general guidance about...
And I looked at the general guidance.
And we all agree that that's vague and not necessarily a good standard in and of itself. But any applicant, any proffered zoning, an applicant can come in today and request an amendment to those proffers.
I completely agree with that.
Okay. May I make a comment? Sure. So basically what you're telling me this does is, it eliminates the need for a public hearing. So we don't have 4 meetings, we have 2 or 3 meetings. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, only if the board agrees to it.
If we agree to waive the public hearing, what it does is it cuts down on the number of meetings that we have to get it to our level to approve or disapprove.
Possibly.
That's what, possibly approve or disapprove. That's what this does. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't change the proffers. It doesn't do anything. That's all it does is give us the authority to do that.
Right. And the reality of it is you're probably wasting your time as far as I'm concerned. Because I vote to approve something based on the proffers that they present in front of us. So if he's going to come back, Mike's going to come back and change the proffers, I'm not going to approve it. I don't care what they are.
I'll agree with that, and I wouldn't either, but I think that there could be cases when you may have changing when the proffers are due is different than changing the amount of proffer.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not interested in changing the amount of the proffer.
Right.
But I do believe, again, I also have to sort of attach this to the same thing we had a couple of weeks ago from a standpoint, anything that I believe we can do at our level to jumpstart and to stimulate some activity in Caroline County, we need to be doing it as long as it does not hurt the county. And delaying for 60 days, the amount of proffer that's paid, I don't believe is hurting Caroline County. I think it's helping us if we're able to jumpstart the process and able to jumpstart some building in the county. And I think this allows us to do that without going through the Planning Commission public hearing as well as the Board of Supervisors processes that we have to go through.
And really what we're saying is this is for basically the subdivisions that have already been approved, because those are the only ones with proffers in that we could modify. So we're trying to help builders, developers, future residents get into houses quicker now.
Absolutely, it's always-
The other issue is, and I know specifically because I had to talk about Belmont North last week with that developer, and his land 3 years ago was assessed a lot higher than what it is now. So he could have he's basically going to lose money if he sells his lots at what it is now with all the proffers. That's a case where we're really going to have to think long and hard about what to do. But the reality of the situation is if he came and said, I've got $1,100, I'm going to pay half now, half in a year, I might think about it, but that's the real issue. And he gets to do that, as Bobby said, faster because there's less meetings if the board agrees. That's really all it is.
All right, any other discussion?
I'm done.
All right. Is there a motion to move this on to public hearing?
What you would be doing would be referring this to the Planning Commission. This is a zoning amendment, has to go to the Planning Commission for their public hearing and comment first, and recommendation to the board.
Okay, so this note here, staff, consider public hearing for September 8th is not,
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry. That it would require referral to the Planning Commission.
Unless we vote to waive the public hearings? Just kidding.
okay, is
Just
that
kidding.
motion- Is there a motion to pass it on to the planning commission?
So moved.
That's second.
Motion made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Thomas. Is there discussion on the motion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion's carried, 4-1. All right, next item on the agenda is new business. Recommendations for additional incentives for fire and rescue volunteers. Ms. Chenault? How are you this evening?
I'm dandy.
After a long night, right?
Well, it's been a learning experience. I enjoy this. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you. I almost brought my little stool in here. I do want to be taken seriously. You can take me seriously, can't you?
We see you.
At
We
this
take you
height? Okay. You all asked us to identify and to analyze possible incentives to recruit and retain volunteer fire and rescue members for the county. And as you know, we've been working for quite a while now, and we appreciate this opportunity to make this presentation for your consideration. The Emergency Services Commission has been working closely with all 9 fire and rescue units to recruit and retain volunteers to help provide services for the county residents, and as a first step to find how the captains and chiefs would use an opportunity to enhance their R&R activities. With the approval of Mr. Ashcraft and the board, we added that $2,500 to each of their operating budgets, and the only stipulation was that they give us a report at the end on how they fared, what they learned from this. And the reports were varied, and some were good, but not enough to fund this method again. The reports are amended or hyperlinked to the minutes of the August 12th meeting if you want to view those. On August 3rd, we held a work session to explore additional programs that we felt would serve to improve the recruitment and retention activities. We agreed that whatever we decided would be consistently implemented across all 9 units. We processed the results of the individual unit activity, and nothing that was done was suitable for generalizing to the other units. The memorandum Alan Parton wrote to you, dated July 9th of 2009, outlined the possible volunteer and rescue incentives, was used as the basis for our further discussion. There are several ideas presented in the memo that the ESC felt might work, but each was discussed, and some presented implementation or legal issues that would take too long, or we wouldn't be able to resolve them to our satisfaction. The first program we dealt with was the awarding of vehicle decals, and each fire and rescue unit uses these currently as R&R incentive. However, it became apparent that the criteria for awarding these was rather loose and varies a little from unit to unit, but all units are using the criteria, which does use the calls run and days work to be eligible for the decal, and as a result, we elected to keep them as part of the package and not redefine the reward criteria currently being used. Of the many possibilities we considered, we are recommending to the Board of Supervisors 2 for adoption. The first is to match the individual's donation into the Volunteer Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Service Award Fund, otherwise known as VOLSAP. And the second is to provide a 50% personal property tax relief on a personal vehicle. Each of these programs would have definite eligibility requirements for participation by the volunteers. The VOLSAP is a statewide retirement program headquartered in Richmond, and each volunteer or rescue worker is recognized as an active member of a chartered volunteer fire department or emergency rescue squad as defined in the Code of Virginia. May contribute $10 a month or $30 per quarter. We are proposing that the county match the exact sum that the volunteer contributes up to $30 per quarter with a maximum match of $120 annually. Currently, less than 50% of all volunteers participate in this program, and as an example, Frog Level Fire said that of the 33 active volunteers, only 9 belong to VOLSAP, and the ESC is recommending that if approved, the program would begin January 1st of 2010, coinciding with the beginning of the VOLSAP fiscal year. The ESC also recommends that the county only set aside $5,000 in fund to cover the last 6 months of the current budget year, as the program wasn't anticipated when the budget was finalized, and in 2010 set aside $10,000 to fully fund it. The second incentive program the ESC is recommending is to offer a 50% personal property tax discount on one vehicle to volunteers who meet the same criteria as defined in the VOLSAP program. It has been estimated by the county treasurer that a 50% personal property tax discount on one vehicle per eligible volunteer would result in a revenue loss of approximately $10,600 for the county. But given that the revenue predictions for fiscal year have been calculated and budgeted, the ESC is further recommending that this tax deferment program be initiated on July 1st, 2010 at the beginning of each fiscal year. This incentive has been used in other jurisdictions with much success. To summarize, the ESC is recommending that we retain the current vehicle program with no changes and no action is required. Number 2, initiate a contribution to match up to $120 per year for volunteers meeting the defined criteria for the VOLSAP program and personally contributing funds for their retirement. As the VOLSAP managers use the Virginia Retirement System formula to invest their funds, the assets of the funds are safe. Funding levels for this program are $5,000 for January through June 2010 and a maximum of $10,000 every fiscal year thereafter. Number 3, we'd like to begin a personal property tax discount on one vehicle per volunteer meeting the defined criteria, and the program would begin in July of 2010 and fund to a max of $10,000 for the first year. The Emergency Services Commission believes that the combination of all 3 programs will provide the kind of incentive programs needed to not only increase recruitment of new volunteers, but entice those recruited to continue to grow as volunteers with their respective fire and rescue units. We look forward to working with all of these units to satisfactorily implement these important programs and watch the ranks of the volunteers grow.
Thank you, Mrs. Chenault. Appreciate that.
Are there
Do we have
any
any questions of Mrs. Chenault?
I don't have any questions. I want to thank the commission for doing this because I think it's been a long time coming, looking at this kind of thing for the volunteers. I appreciate the hard work.
Thank you. Yeah, we've put in a lot of time and effort.
That's the only comment I have.
Ms. Chenault, you didn't include the reduced registration fees for Parks and Rec in your recommendation?
No, that's not part of our recommendation.
Okay, you don't want to, or? You need to do a little more research on that one, or what?
We're just volunteer units, emergency services volunteer. That's Parks and Rec.
No, there was in one of these, there was an idea, reduced registration fees for Parks and Rec programs. Volunteers and their immediate household members could be offered half-price registration.
That was one of the proposals that felt these two were covering more people.
Okay.
Okay. You want to repeat that just so they can replay it back?
That was one of the proposals that the ESC looked at, but we thought that the two that we recommended would cover more people with,
Okay. Thank
with
you.
a bigger bang, is what John said,
Okay.
to reiterate.
Thank you. Jeff?
Mr. Lehman, you, it's your first meeting. Do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. I came in at the end of this proposal. Deputy Director Garnett was working with the ESC on this. Worked with Mr. Parton on finalizing it. It looks like a sound program, and all of our staff recommend it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, is there any more discussion?
I just had one other point. I just like to see the ESC and the CCUO continue to be involved in the definition of active fire and rescue, since those guys, the CCUO is right at the level of all the chiefs, and we need to make sure they stay involved so we don't lose any momentum that they currently have. And I'm hoping that the ESC is used as a sounding board to actually look at how we're going to determine some of the definitions of fire and rescue volunteers, because I think those inputs are very valuable.
Okay. If there are no other comments, is there a motion to approve the recommendations of the Emergency Services Committee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Seeley, that we approve the recommendations from the Emergency Services Committee, or Commission rather, as to the implementation of these programs. Discussion on the motion.
I just again I'm hoping that we will see in the future what the qualifications are from the ESC on fire and rescue, what a volunteer definition is, so we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. We'll definitely keep that in mind.
John,
Thank
you had...
Well, the wholesale program has a set of guidelines already laid out, so we didn't repeat, and that's why we based the other program on the VOLSAP rules and regulations, and we can get those for you, so you'll have. But they have it already laid out.
Oh, okay.
And that was in our packet that we...
I think you all have a brochure, outlining that.
Okay, further discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion's carried.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Short, the Commissioner.
Thank the Commissioner of Revenue too, Mr. Chairman. I see she's stayed around with us, and we appreciate that.
She's always there for us, I'll tell you. Next item on the agenda is proposed lease. Well, I'd like to pull that. The school board has not had an opportunity to look at the lease agreement, and so we're going to pull the lease agreement and bring it back on September the 8th, or whatever the date would be.
They still wouldn't have had,
What?
they still wouldn't have a chance to see it.
I thought they have a meeting Monday before we have it.
That's Labor Day.
That's Labor Day weekend.
They wouldn't have a meeting on Labor Day, I wouldn't think.
All right, so we'll bring it back the last meeting in September.
Okay.
Item number 11. Proposed installation of utility lines in conjunction with VDOT Carmel Church I-95 Interchange Improvement Project. Good afternoon, good evening, Mr.
Good evening, yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm here this evening to discuss a window of opportunity that has presented itself for a relatively short time to the county in conjunction with the current project that is going on where VDOT is doing some intersection work down off of 207 in the vicinity where the Super 8 is and the Exxon station. and the improvement work that they're doing and some roadway realignment. Came to our attention that this is also in the same area where, as we presented the PER for the Caroline Pines waterline extension, that there is an opportunity here to at least make the first step at a fairly substantial savings to put in the pipeline that would be in this work zone while VDOT is already doing the work, using their contractor who is already mobilized, and of course cutting back on some of the things we would have to pay for if we were going in from scratch to do this, such as restoration and other things that we really would not be responsible for under the current conditions with VDOT doing the work. So we've looked at the fact of what is absolutely needed, and then also looked at what do we need to simply get out of the work zone. So there are two issues involved. The first one being the installation of a carrier pipe and also the casing pipe involved with it that would go under the new roadway, such that when the road is paved, if we were to go back and try and put a pipeline across that roadway while it's still under VDOT's bonding, we would be required to tunnel under that roadway. And that gets to be relatively expensive on the tunneling end. We can put the carrier pipe and the casing pipe in right now using their existing contractor in open cut, which is much less expensive and easier, by the way, which is why it's less expensive. So that is kind of, at least from utilities' point of view, kind of a necessity at this point. But the other thing we'd like to discuss is that anything we could do to actually get out of the work zone that exists there would be that much, again, work that we would be able to get done cheaper because of less requirements. As I said, no restoration and paving and other things like that, because VDOT would, that's all part of their project. And again, using their contractor, we can have him do it with no additional mobilization costs. And the reason we're here this evening is because they're pretty well advanced in this work, and in the next 2 or 3 weeks will be finished, so our opportunity will be ended. So I'm here tonight to present this, answer any questions you might have, and see if we can get some approval to put some of this pipe in.
Okay. What have any questions, comments?
Don't have any questions, just a comment to the board that this is definitely an opportunity. I mean, when you're talking about having to cut roads and that kind of thing, it gets to be really expensive. And, you know, we certainly don't, if we have an opportunity to do something like this on the quick and dirty, I think we ought to go ahead and do it. It makes a lot of sense in the long term.
Other comments? Questions?
I'd like to give kudos, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Roselle, who brought this to my attention last week, I believe, and said I pretty much assumed we were doing that, and he said we weren't, so we should do it. So I do want to thank him for his foresight.
Other comments, questions?
And it's well within our ability to pay for this out of the proffer fund?
I would think so.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Belmont has proffers coming in from that area, and it's being used in an area that Belmont would be impacting, so.
Belmont has already paid quite a few proffers.
I just said there was money from Belmont.
Yeah.
You
said coming in.
What?
You said coming in. It's already been in. Just past tense. No problem. It's late. Go ahead. Forget I said
I think y'all are saying the same thing.
I think we are as well. Is there a motion to approve this work and to pay for it out of the proffer fund?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
What?
We need, because of the Procurement Act, we need, I think, to make a
do we need an emergency ordinance?
I would add language that because of the timing of the opportunity, it constitutes an emergency, and that this contractor is the sole practical source of having the work done because of his relationship with VDOT and doing the work on the on the road and the project.
Okay.
Those two grounds.
Did you make the motion?
You made the motion.
Oh,
I second.
it is late. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would amend my motion to state that due to the time factors required, that the board move with the sole source because this particular vendor is uniquely qualified because he is currently doing the project, and the timeline with which the county can have this accomplished at a reasonable fee is so short, we have no ability to go out to an RFP.
Sole source, okay. Is there, Mr. Popowitz, are you willing to
I will amend my second.
second to that? Okay. Discussion on the motion. Ms. Roselle.
The only thing I saw, Mr. Borchak did say that, the window of opportunity is about 2 weeks before the window shuts. So that's
So we should be,
important to
I
know.
mean,
He
I
should,
would think after the night, you should have the authority, permission to give them
Yeah.
authority to move ahead.
Yeah.
he should be there at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
The email will go
discussion?
out tonight.
Okay.
Further discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you, John, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Number 12, proposed amendment of Chapter 92 of the Code of Caroline County related to the Phase 2 of Don.
You pulled that one.
We pulled that, absolutely we did.
Peace.
Informational calendar items, Mr. Ashcraft. Make it short and sweet, would you please?
Mr. Chairman, between now and your next board meeting on September the 8th, there's 2 events happening on September the 1st. One is that you've been invited as a board to the back-to-school celebration at 8:30 at the high school. It's been at the middle school and high school. Now it's back to the high school. It's not the first day. First day of school is September the 8th. And on September the 1st will also be Bring Your Child to Work Day in county government. We always ask the board to drop by the offices and kind of interact with the employees or the children of some of the employees as they, Molly will be there.
All right.
Oh, I'm going to be in Chicago.
Say hello to Molly.
That's mostly in the morning, and then we have a luncheon, employee luncheon, and then let them go in the afternoon. So
Okay,
that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
thank you. Is there a motion to go into closing board comments? Mr. Popowitz.
I have none.
Mr. Thomas.
No, thank you.
Mr. Seeley.
No, sir.
Mr. Rozelle.
None, Mr. Chairman.
I have none as well. Mr. Rozelle, do you have a motion to go into closed meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we convene a closed meeting pursuant to personnel exception 2.2-3711A1 Code of Virginia to discuss job form position for employment of the county, and 2, acquisition of real property exemption 2.23711A3 Code of Virginia to discuss potential disposition of interest of real property by leasing the same an outdoor advertising company where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the county's bargaining position or negotiating strategies. And number 3, in consultation with legal counsel, exemption 2.2-3711A7 of the code for consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff concerning potential claim against the county. And that's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rozelle, seconded by Mr. Seeley. You heard the motion. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The board will now enter closed meeting.